This ain't no audiobook. This ain't a radio play. This is a Happy Cloud AudioToon. It's that time again for the Further Adventures of Rune, Return of the Miggins, brought to you by Happy Cloud Media and Chrome Toothpaste.
Cantos Interruptus, memory shared by Eccles and Bluebottle. Dutiful they were, soldiers in service of Snee and that other one, yet Eccles and Bluebottle felt no small amount of apprehension, still having quite a bit of it on hand, stored as it was with their fears and trepidations. Their troubles were packed up in their old kit bag, but you don't want to hear about that right now. "Do ye remember Bluebottle?" asked Eccles, his tones most hushed. "Speak up," said Bluebottle, quite the opposite. "Those many fleens ago?" "No. Too many fleens have passed." "That's linear time for you. It comes for all of us." "What does?" "Buses, mostly. No reason to run. There's always another." Eccles took a breath, allowing his train of thought to catch up to the current station. "I refer to our time in Krill, during the undeaded times." "Do ye wonder?" "Quite often, and to my detriment." "If that's how we became unkillable." "The general and his goddess." "Stranger things have happened." "True. At least 5 seasons." "Well, I cancelled Palantir Flicks." "That was my account, Bluebottle, you swine." To expedite things, a summarized reminder. Oh, those many fleens ago, when the young goddess Circe Circa began her whirlwind romance with the recently dead Rune the Grey, the upper world experienced a pause in mortality. At first, it affected only her true believers, the worshippers who kept her thriving in Dismadonna, but it didn't do anyone else any favors either. It was especially dismaying to a pair of newly arrived traveling morticians, eager to ply their wares to the Krillish town of Beswick, suffering its tragic wartime losses. Bluebottle, and, to a lesser extent Eccles, stood to make a fortune off the numerous war widows, half off for war orphans, a quarter off for corpses as is. Eccles, and to a lesser extent Bluebottle, carriaged into town with their wares of coffins, urns, headstones, footstones, memorials, mementos mori, Dory, Ori, and Beaufort, and a fine supply of alibis designed for prying eyes. While a nightingale sang, Eccles and Bluebottle set up shop in Berkeley Square. Then they waited. Another aside, real quick. As the war between the Worcestershires and the veterans waged in very nearby Gunkweed Forest, the unimaginable happened quite suddenly. The first to notice was a veteran, Phil Urquhart Saracen, named after his mother, who had just skewered a Worcester footman named Garfield Blick. Phil's pike had gone straight through Garfield Blick's head, through one ear and out the other, pinning the man to the tree behind him. It had been a heck of a shot, and Phil had every reason to be proud. That is, until Garfield Blick began wriggling again, awkwardly sliding his head the length of the Pike of Freedom, making an unspeakably disgusting noise that totally ruined Phil's victory dance, as well as his lunch. With a tunnel through his melon wide enough to require a toll booth, Garfield Blick turned drunkenly towards his attacker and said simply, "What?" Throughout the Gunkweed Forest, men were hacked at, slashed at, gouged, stabbed, poked, piked, halberded, bludgeoned, and otherwise inconvenienced. But only the legless remained at ground, and only then until they sobered up. Very discouraging. To the outsider, it sounded like this. "Ha! Hey! Slash! No fair! Stab! Missed me! Clearly I didn't! Did so! My sword is up your nose! Prove it!" Anyway... Bluebottle and Eccles sat aboard their triple-decker two-tone Mariah with racing stripes, rear spoiler, and the most solemn of hubcaps, and awaited the rush for their coffins and caskets and for someone to explain the difference. In a crushing display of supply and demand, the expected flood of grieving relatives and turgid estate agents never came, and neither Bluebottle nor Eccles could stop them from not coming. Some days later, Mrs. Felix Rubberbustle, a new if there ever was one, heard a knock at her door, signaling a knocker outside. She'd grown accustomed to this social cause and effect and fulfilled her part of the implied contract by opening said door. On the other side, she found a pair of humanish morticians. In their long cloaks, black and respectful, the two men looked even more gaunt and drawn than would be normally expected. This pair, she surmised, were starving. Bluebottle cleared his throat, opaqued it again, then began. "Good morning, sir, or madam. I am Mr. Bluebottle, and this is, to a lesser extent, Mr. Eccles." Eccles attempted a smile. 3 passing children burst into tears. "We are but humble masters of the mortuary arts, offering our services to this fine and misty morn." "Yeah, the lawn needs mowing," said Mrs. Felix Rubberbustle. Eccles turned to retrieve his scythe. Bluebottle stopped him with a sharp look and a sharper elbow. Returning to Mrs. Felix Rubberbustle, Bluebottle drew himself to his least impressive height, having found a kernel of dignity behind a rear molar. "To clarify, my dear, let's say, lady, we offer the finest post-mortem services money or decorum can buy. Might I inquire if you happen to have a corpse laying about for demonstration purposes? No, said Mrs. Felix Rubberbustle, voice like a rusty hinge. Don't seem like anyone's passed on for days now. Are you certain? Asked Eccles, exceeding his authority by at least half a foot and raising his voice to compensate. Sometimes they act like perfectly alive people, and you'd be surprised how quickly the nose accustoms to the smell. I have anecdotal evidence in support of this, said Bluebottle, producing his credentials, until Eccles begged him to cover his shame. No corpses in here, said Mrs. Felix Rubberbustle. I've got a gourd going, Goey. We'll take it, started Eccles, but he was hushed by Bluebottle's hat sailing into his epiglottis. Are you perfectly certain? Implored Bluebottle, thesaurus at his ready. Dead children tend to get overlooked, under beds and in closets and coal cellars. In trees, added Eccles. In trees? Eccles shrugged. Very sad ones that can tie knots. Oh, heavens! Yeah, if they're lucky. Pets? Asked Bluebottle, desperately steering the conversation back towards business and a possible hope of dinner. The loyal dog, wagging its tail towards that rainbow bridge. Bifrost? No, the depressing one. But before Mrs. Felix Rubberbustle could further deny them, he rattled desperately. A cat, perhaps? Lovely, fluffy wafferkins, finally flattened by the milkman. Mrs. Felix Rubberbustle attempted to close her door. Bluebottle hurled his shoulder against it, doing quite well, though she was twice his height, and width, and depth. Goldfish, ma'am. Upside downish and prepared for its last journey down the loo. Or perhaps a suicidal spider. Could you check your corners? What about your husband, ma'am? Asked Eccles, giving it one more go at participating in the conversation. He's been dead 5 fleens, said Mrs. Felix Rubberbustle, which is what she told everyone. I see, said Bluebottle. Have you considered renewing your eulogy? How are you feeling yourself, madam? You seem quite green about your gills. What color would you have my gills? I didn't mean to criticize. I'm calling the police. Things didn't get better in Bestwick, not for Bluebottle, nor to a lesser extent Eccles. Ironically, the day they finally met the Deathless Village to make their way north towards the reluctant Dragon Queen Daenerys Yossarian was also the day that Rune the Grey was returned to the land of the living, and the various wounded, maimed, bloody, and complaining soldiers were finally embraced by the land of the dead. Yay. But Eccles never had much in the way of good timing. Neither, to an equal or greater extent, had Bluebottle.
Join us next week at whatever time you want for the Further Adventures of Rune.